My boss tried to ruin my career because I told him no once. I wasn't disrespectful. I didn't yell. I didn't slam any doors. I just said, I'd rather stay where I am. And that was enough for him to decide I needed to be taught a lesson. I'm not the dramatic story guy at work. I'm the quiet IT dude who shows up on time, fixes whatever's broken, and goes home to microwave leftovers and watch dumb tech videos. For 5 years, that was my life at Northbridge Logistics. Gray building, gray carpets, stable paycheck, stable boredom. I was okay with that. My name's Evan. I'm 32, systems analyst, mid-level, nothing flashy. When all this started, I honestly thought I was on decent terms with my boss, Mr. Collins. He was the kind of guy who wore expensive watches and called people champ in a way that somehow still felt like an insult. But he approved my trainings, signed off on my raises, and mostly left me alone as long as the network stayed up and the reports ran. The company had 2 IT teams, infrastructure, where I worked, and business applications, which Collins directly ran. Infra was the quiet basement of the company. Servers, backups, hardware, security patches. Business apps was upstairs with the important people. Project meetings, dashboards, direct exposure to VPs. People used to joke that Collins' department was where careers went to get promoted and die. You'd see someone move over there, disappear into endless meetings, and then 6 months later, their LinkedIn would suddenly say, open to work. Everyone knew it was toxic, but nobody could point to one single thing. Just burnout, politics, people crying in their cars on lunch breaks and pretending it was allergies. I never thought I'd be invited into that mess, and I definitely never thought I'd be punished for refusing. The day it started was weirdly ordinary. It was a Tuesday, because of course it was. I was halfway through an email to a vendor about a failing switch when my Outlook pinged with a calendar invite. 1.1 Career Growth, Collins, Evan, 2:30 p.m. No context, just that. Career growth. Most people would get excited. I felt my stomach do this little half-turn like my body knew something my brain didn't. At 2:30, I walked into his office. Glass walls, framed certificates, some blurry golf photo with a regional VP. Collins was on his phone, laughing at something, then he saw me and switched into mentor mode, so fast it was almost a sound. Evan, my man, he said, standing up and coming around the desk like we were old friends. Sit down, sit down. How's life in the engine room? Busy, I said, because it always was. But good. He nodded like I'd passed a test. Listen, I won't waste your time. You've been on my radar for a while. That sentence should have felt flattering. It didn't. It felt like a spotlight I hadn't asked for. You're consistent, he went on. No drama, no missed deadlines. Your tickets are clean. You don't complain. He smiled. Those are rare traits around here. Thanks, I said carefully. He sat on the edge of his desk instead of behind it. Classic move. Tell me, Evan, have you thought about your next step? Where you see yourself in, say, 2 years? I had. It mostly involved still being employed, and maybe finally paying off my student loans. I've been focusing on deepening my infra skills, I said. Security, automation. I'm starting a scripting course next month. He waved a hand like I'd mentioned a hobby. Sure, but I mean bigger picture. He leaned in. What if I told you there's room on my team upstairs? Business applications, direct alignment with leadership, more visibility, bigger projects, bigger numbers on your paycheck. There it was. My first reaction wasn't excitement. It was a mental image of Jenna from service desk, sitting in her car last winter, staring at her steering wheel with her eyes red. She'd just come from Collins' area. He just drains you, she'd said when I asked if she was okay. Like every day is an audition you didn't know you signed up for. Is this a posted role? I asked, buying time. He smiled. Not yet. This is me giving you a heads up. We're restructuring. I want strong, reliable people in my group. People I can count on. People who don't crumble when things get tough. That last part had teeth. I took a breath. It would have been easy to just nod and say yes. Go with the current, hope for the best, like everyone else did. But something in me was tired of defaulting to sure, just because someone above me expected it. I appreciate that you thought of me, I said, and I meant it to an extent. But I'm actually pretty happy in infra. I like the work I do there. I feel like I'm just hitting my stride. The air in the room shifted just slightly. His smile didn't move, but the muscles around his eyes did. Of course, he said slowly. I'm not forcing you. Just opening doors. Right, I said. I just don't want to move departments right now. There was a short silence. His tongue pressed against his cheek for a second, then disappeared. You know, he said, sometimes staying comfortable is the biggest risk you can take. I get that, I answered. I've just seen a lot of turnover upstairs. I think my skill set is better used where I am. If a formal posting goes up, I can look at it, but as of now, I'd like to stay in infra. I was trying so hard to keep it respectful, to give him an out where he could save face. I didn't say your team is a burnout machine or people hate working under you, even though I'd heard both whispered in break rooms. I just said no, as politely as possible. He watched me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw the smile drop completely. Just for half a second, but it was long enough. You're turning down a promotion, he said, and it wasn't a question. I'm turning down a transfer I didn't ask for, I said. My voice hadn't gotten louder, but it had gotten firmer. I heard it too. He nodded slowly, stood up, walked back behind his desk. The friendly act was gone. The boss had come back. Understood, he said. It's your career, Evan. I can't want it more than you do. That one stung more than it should have. I do want it, I said. I just don't think this is the right move for me. Sure, he replied, already looking at his monitor. We're done here. Close the door on your way out. I walked back to my cubicle with that sentence chewing at me. It's your career. I can't want it more than you do. It was the kind of line you could quote in a motivational poster, right up until you remembered the look in his eyes when he said it. The first punishment came the next morning disguised as opportunity. At 8:45 a.m., my manager, Kristen, pinged me on Teams. Hey, quick stand-up at 9 or in the huddle room. New project assignment. Bring your notebook. New project. Okay. I grabbed my coffee and went. The huddle room was half full. Me, 2 guys from infra, 1 DB admin, and Kristen. There was a large Gantt chart printout on the wall, fresh enough that it still curled at the edges. So, she said, clapping once, we've got an urgent internal project. We're migrating all shared drives to a new structure by the end of Q2. It's going to be intense. I opened my notebook. That definitely sounded like work for infra. Evan, she said, looking right at me. You'll be leading the inventory phase. You'll be the point of contact for every department. Mapping, documenting, chasing down owners, scheduling meetings, all the fun stuff. She smiled like she'd given me a puppy. Okay, I said slowly. And the technical side? Oh, that'll mostly be handled by the others, she said, waving a hand at the team. We just really need someone organized to manage the users. So while my peers were setting up scripts, designing the structure, and doing the actual migration, I'd be babysitting folders and sitting in meetings where people argued about what to name things. Did Collins talk to you? Kristen asked casually after the meeting when the others had filed out. About you taking on more client-facing work, she said. He mentioned wanting you more visible. This is a good step. I felt that same little twist in my gut. He did talk about a transfer, I said carefully. I told him I'd prefer to stay in infra. Her eyes flickered for a second, then her manager face snapped back on. Well, this is still infra, she said lightly. Just adjacent. It'll look great on your review. That week, my calendar turned into a graveyard of back-to-back meetings with people who had no idea what was on their own drives and were angry at me for making them find out. My usual deep work, the stuff that actually made me feel competent, got pushed to evenings and early mornings. I told myself it was just a phase. Every job has rough patches, right? You take one for the team. It evens out later. That's what I kept repeating as I sat in yet another cramped conference room, listening to someone in marketing complain that they couldn't possibly delete anything from 2011. Friday, when the weekly performance report went out, I saw another small shift. My name, which was normally somewhere near the top in ticket resolution, had slid down. Fewer tickets closed. Longer times. Because I was in meetings Collins had indirectly shoved me into. No one said anything. No one had to. The numbers were there. 2 weeks later, the quarterly bonus list was posted on the intranet. I scrolled through it at my desk, more out of habit than hope. My name had been there every quarter for the last 3 years. It wasn't there. I refreshed the page twice, like that would change anything. Then I walked down to Kristen's office and knocked on the open door. "Hey," I said. "Quick question. Did something change with the bonus criteria?" She didn't look surprised I was there. That was the worst part. "Hey, Evan." She folded her hands. "It's mostly the same. Utilization, ticket metrics, project contributions, that kind of thing." "Right," I said. "My numbers dipped a bit this month because of the migration inventory, but overall—" "Collins reviewed the list personally this time," she said quietly. "He had feedback." There it was again. That spotlight I hadn't asked for. "What kind of feedback?" I asked. She hesitated just long enough to make the answer hurt. "He said he didn't see evidence you were hungry for growth, that you'd passed on opportunities." My throat went dry, because I didn't want to transfer to his team. "I'm just telling you what was said," she replied. "Officially, bonuses are discretionary. There's nothing I can appeal." I stood there, hand on the doorframe, feeling stupid and exposed. I hadn't raised my voice. I hadn't made a scene. I just said no once, in a calm voice, in a closed office, and somehow that quiet no had followed me all the way down here to my paycheck. I went back to my desk, put my headset on, and answered 3 tickets in a row just to feel like I still had control over something. But the whole time, a thought kept circling in the back of my mind, stubborn and unwelcome. If this was his reaction to a polite refusal, I had no idea how far he was willing to go. I didn't know it yet, but that bonus was just the opening move. The following Monday, Collins behaved like we'd never had that conversation in his office. He nodded at me in the hallway, made a joke about another fun week in tech, and even held the elevator door. If I hadn't already seen my name missing from the bonus list, I might have believed him. But people like him don't get quiet. They get strategic. By Wednesday, the next shift began. It started with a meeting invite, another one with no explanation, no agenda, just Department Sync, mandatory, 3 p.m. Mandatory for who? The whole infra team? No, just me. I walked in at 2:59. Collins was standing by the whiteboard, arms crossed, expression neutral in that unsettling corporate way. Kristen was beside him, stiff as a ruler, and 2 project managers I barely knew were sitting at the table with laptops open. "Evan," Collins said, gesturing at the seat across from him. "Thanks for being on time. Let's jump right in." No greeting, no small talk, a bad sign. "We've received feedback," he continued, clicking to the next slide on the TV. My name was on it. "You've been slow to respond to business partners." My eyebrows shot up. "Slow? My SLA numbers are green." "They were," Collins corrected. "But since you started the inventory project, multiple stakeholders have mentioned delays." "I've been in meetings you assigned me," I said carefully. "If I missed anything, I followed up." He flipped to another slide. A ticket. Assigned to me. Time stamped last week. Response time. 42 minutes. 42 minutes. SLA allowed 4 hours. "This," he said, "is concerning." I stared at the screen, then back at him. "That ticket was resolved the same hour. It wasn't urgent." "We don't wait for urgency to measure performance," Collins replied. "Consistency is key." Something tightened in my chest, but I kept my voice level. If this is feedback, I'm open to it. But a single 42-minute response time isn't a pattern. That depends, he said, on what comes next. I didn't realize until later how loaded that sentence was. The meeting ended with vague instructions, undefined expectations, and the kind of corporate language you use when you want someone to fail but don't want your fingerprints on the failure. As I left the room, Kristen touched my elbow lightly. "Evan," she murmured, "just document everything." That was the moment I knew this wasn't paranoia. This was real. A week later, the project assignments changed again. My coworker, Mark, one of the best network guys we had, got pulled into a shiny new cross-department project with senior leadership, a project I was supposed to be considered for this year. He stopped by my desk around lunch, leaning on the partition. "You okay, man?" Saw the sync invitation. Collins looked pissed. "He wasn't pissed," I said. "He was building a case." Mark exhaled. "Yeah, I've seen him do that before." My stomach dropped. "To who?" He hesitated, glanced around, then lowered his voice. 2 years ago, he tried to get David pushed out. Said he was unreliable. Dude had taken 2 sick days. 2 in 12 months. And what happened? Collins kept feeding leadership negative snapshots until David finally left. Voluntary resignation on paper. Mark grimaced. Everyone knew it wasn't voluntary. I sat back, pulse in my throat. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't overreacting. This was a pattern. Over the next month, it escalated exactly the way patterns do, with tiny cuts that don't look like much alone, but bleed you dry in the long run. My access to the new monitoring tool had to be temporarily revoked due to role alignment. A recurring meeting I'd always been invited to disappeared from my calendar. A project I'd been leading for months was suddenly reassigned to better distribute workload. My request for a training stipend got postponed until the next cycle. Individually, excuses, together, a squeeze, and Collins never raised his voice. He never insulted me directly. He didn't need to. He'd say things like, "Not everyone's cut out for upward mobility," or "Some people stagnate because they don't take opportunities," or "It's unfortunate when employees limit themselves," always said with a smile, always within earshot of someone. That's how reputations die in offices, not with scandals, but with whispers delivered in professional tones. 2 moments broke me. The first was an email, one single email, that told me everything about how far this was going. It came from HR. "Hi, Evan. We'd like to schedule a brief check-in to discuss recent feedback regarding your communication patterns. Please share your availability." Communication patterns. I stared at the screen, heartbeat drilling in my ears. I wasn't unprofessional. I wasn't late. I wasn't rude. I wasn't unreliable. The only thing I'd done wrong was say no. I called HR immediately, voice steady, only because I'd forced it to be. "Can you clarify what this is about?" I asked. "Well," the HR rep said, "your director mentioned concerns about responsiveness and engagement." Director. Collins had wasted no time escalating. "And what concerns?" I pressed. "Oh, nothing formal," she said quickly. "Just an informal conversation. We just want to make sure you feel supported." Sure. Supported. The same way a spider supports a fly, by holding it still. I hung up and stared at the wall until the edges of my vision sharpened again. That was the moment the fear switched into something colder. The second moment came 2 days later. I walked into the break room to get coffee and found 2 analysts from Collins' team standing by the counter whispering. "He's on his way out," one said. "Yeah, Collins said he's checked out lately." He was good too. Shame. They didn't see me until I stepped fully inside. Both froze. "Morning," I said. They mumbled greetings and practically sprinted out the door. I stood there alone, watching the coffee drip, feeling heat rise in my hands. That wasn't an accident. Those weren't rumors. That was a narrative he was building. And if I didn't do something, I'd walk right into the outcome he'd already written. That night, sitting at my kitchen table, the house silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, I opened my laptop and did something I'd never done before. I created a folder. I named it Insurance. Inside it, I started saving everything: emails, Slack messages, meeting notes, performance reviews, times Collins contradicted policy, times expectations were changed without documentation, times he'd asked me to do something verbally that could get me blamed later. Every date, every detail, every inconsistency. I didn't know yet how much I'd need it, or how big it would become. But that night, I stopped being the hero. I stopped being the quiet guy hoping the storm would pass. Because storms don't pass when the person causing them wants you to drown. And Collins, he had no idea I'd just taken the first step toward the thing he feared most, a paper trail, and I wasn't collecting it for defense. I was collecting it for something much, much bigger. I didn't plan revenge, not at first. All I wanted was to protect myself. But when someone keeps pushing you toward the edge, there comes a moment when you stop stepping back. And Collins kept pushing. By the third week, the informal concerns from HR became a pattern. Little check-ins, polite questions, soft traps. Do you feel overwhelmed lately? Is everything okay outside of work? We've noticed some disengagement. I was working harder than ever, just not in the direction Collins wanted. And then everything snapped on a Wednesday morning. At 9:12 a.m., my inbox lit up with something that made my stomach drop. Evan, please be prepared to review the status of the Data Integrity Project at 1 p.m. Collins. The Data Integrity Project wasn't mine. It never had been mine. I wasn't even on the email chain for it. So I opened the shared drive and froze. There it was, a document, a status report, with my name at the top, created by Collins, edited yesterday, assigned to me without a single word of warning. At the bottom of the document was a summary saying the project was significantly behind due to Evan's delays. I sat perfectly still, hands flat on the desk. This wasn't pressure. This wasn't punishment. This was manufactured failure. If I walked into that 1 p.m. meeting unprepared, it would confirm the lie he'd already written. I inhaled slowly, exhaled even slower, and made a decision I didn't know I was capable of. I wasn't going to defend myself. I wasn't going to explain. I wasn't going to plead. I was going to expose him. First, I called my brother. He's not dramatic. He's not emotional. He's a contract lawyer who lives in spreadsheets and clauses. Hey, I said, voice flat. I need your help. What kind? He asked. The kind where my boss is building a case to fire me. He didn't breathe for 2 full seconds. Okay, I'll send you a list. Collect everything. I already started, I said. He exhaled. Good. Now keep going. He gave me instructions, crisp and surgical. Document inconsistencies. Document sudden changes in duties. Document verbal instructions. Document retaliatory behavior. Document deviations from policy. Don't confront. Don't react. Don't warn him. And most important, get him to put things in writing. It felt like someone had finally handed me a map. At 12:55 p.m., I walked into the conference room. Collins was at the head of the table. 2 project managers sat beside him. HR rep dialed in remotely. He smiled when he saw me. Not friendly, triumphant. Evan, he said, let's talk about the Data Integrity Project. I pulled out my laptop, opened a blank screen, and looked him dead in the eye. Sure, I said, but first, I'll need written confirmation that this project is assigned to me, since my job description and my previous project list don't include it. His smile twitched. Well, that's implied. I'll need it in writing, I repeated, for clarity. The HR rep spoke up. Yes, documentation would be ideal. His jaw tightened. He hadn't expected HR to take my side on that sentence. They didn't know the situation. They just liked documentation. Collins cleared his throat. Fine. I'll send a note afterward. For now. And, I continued, I'll also need the written assignment date, since the document lists me as responsible before I had any access to it. The room shifted. Project manager number 1 frowned. Project manager #2 looked at Collins like he'd spilled something. HR rep typed something. Collins' voice sharpened. Evan, let's not make this adversarial. I'm not, I said. I'm clarifying expectations. There was silence, the kind that means something's gone wrong. Finally, he forced a laugh. Let's move on. Present your update. I folded my hands. I can't update something I've never been assigned, I said, so I'll wait for the documentation. The meeting ended 4 minutes later. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone in that room realized something. This wasn't the trap he thought it was. This was evidence. From that point on, Collins made mistake after mistake. He tried to issue verbal directives outside policy. I followed up every single time with, just confirming in writing. He tried to withhold information. I requested access via HR. They granted it. He tried to criticize my performance. I asked for concrete examples. He couldn't provide any that matched the records. He tried to corner me in hallways. I responded only in email. Everything he did, everything he tried, went straight into the folder named insurance. And every time he reacted, he showed a little more desperation. That's the thing about toxic managers. They know how to bully, but very few know how to defend. 2 weeks later, the turning point arrived. HR scheduled a formal meeting, not the check-in kind, the investigation kind. The email subject line alone made Collins pale. Follow-up review regarding concerns raised by both parties. Both parties, plural. He wasn't the only one who'd reported something, because I had too. And not a soft complaint. Not a, he makes me uncomfortable. A documented allegation of retaliatory behavior, backed by 36 pages of timeline, screenshots, emails, contradictions, sudden reassignments, falsified responsibilities, and policy violations. I didn't accuse him emotionally, I accused him factually. My brother had helped me format the report. 2 other lawyers reviewed it. It read like a blueprint of misconduct. And when HR launched the investigation, something beautiful happened. People started talking. Quietly, carefully, anonymously, but talking. They mentioned his pattern of assigning impossible workloads, his habit of verbally giving instructions and denying them later, his mood swings during reviews, his pressure tactics, his favoritism, his retaliation when crossed, his tendency to blame subordinates for his delays, and then the big one. Someone submitted a statement saying he'd pressured them to backdate documents last year to protect the department's performance metrics. Backdating, that was a corporate nuke. HR expanded the investigation. Then legal got involved. Then ethics and compliance. And Collins? He started unraveling. He tried to call emergency meetings. He tried to play the victim. He tried to paint me as defensive. He tried to charm VPs. Nothing worked. You can't charm your way out of cold chronological evidence. And every time someone asked him a question during the investigation, he'd contradict a piece of his own story without realizing it. He thought he was improvising, but the investigators weren't listening to his tone. They were comparing timestamps, and he was losing. He didn't know it yet, but that decision he made, the one where he punished me for saying no, it was about to cost him everything, because the truth was no longer a feeling. It was paperwork, and paperwork doesn't lie. Not when the person you tried to crush learned how to build a case. When the investigation reached its 3rd week, the building felt different. People weren't avoiding me anymore. They were avoiding him. Collins walked the halls like a man waiting for a verdict. The loud confidence was gone. The fake charisma was gone. Even the champ comments died. He kept his office door shut. He stopped holding team meetings. He stopped making eye contact with anyone. I didn't celebrate. Not yet. I'd learned enough to know that people like him don't fall silently. They thrash on the way down. But the day everything finally broke didn't come with drama. It came with a calendar invite. Meeting HR plus legal required. $10 IM for both of us. I walked in at 9:59. He came in at 10:01, breathing hard like he'd run. HR rep, Legal counsel, compliance officer. This wasn't a conversation, this was sentencing. The HR rep folded her hands. Thank you both for joining. We're concluding the formal review today. Collins nodded sharply, trying to recover whatever authority he still thought he had. I'd like to begin by stating, he said, voice tight, that these accusations are exaggerated by an employee who has demonstrated escalating hostility and the legal counsel raised a hand without looking at him. Mr. Collins, she said calmly, please refrain from framing the findings until we present them. He shut his mouth. She opened a folder, a thick one, filled with printed emails, logs, statements, timestamps, conflicting directives, and his own contradictory responses from the past weeks. She spoke with the cold precision of someone who has no interest in either ego or emotions. Over the course of this review, she said, we identified multiple policy violations. He blinked. Policy violations? Another raised hand silenced him. First, she continued, retaliatory behavior following a declined internal transfer request. He went still. Second, reassigning responsibilities without documentation and fabricating accountability structures. Sweat formed along his hairline. Third, misleading HR through incomplete statements during the initial assessment. His jaw dropped open. Fourth, altering project timelines retroactively to deflect responsibility. Project managers looked furious when that one surfaced earlier. One of them had provided the smoking gun. Fifth, she said, flipping a page, creating conditions designed to provoke performance issues in a specific employee, which falls under workplace harassment policy. He swallowed, hard. Then came the worst one. And sixth, directing staff to backdate documents last fiscal year, in violation of corporate compliance standards. Collins finally found his voice, and panic cracked it. That's not... They misunderstood. I never... This is taken out of... Evan is... This is... You're twisting... The compliance officer leaned forward. We have statements from 4 separate employees. 2 of them verified with email threads. Silence. Deep, suffocating silence. He closed his eyes for a long moment, like he was hoping to wake up somewhere else. Then he opened them and tried one last thing. The thing all sinking managers try when logic fails. He turned on me. Evan, he said, voice trembling, we can talk. I can fix this. This is all... You don't understand the pressure I'm under. I looked at him. Not angry, not vindictive, just done. There was nothing to fix, I said quietly, until you made it something. That was it. No yelling, no gloating, no revenge speech, just the truth. The HR rep slid a packet across the table. Not toward me, toward him. Mr. Collins, she said, effective immediately, you are placed on administrative leave pending termination for cause. Your access is revoked as of this moment. He stared at the packet like it was a live grenade. No, he whispered, you can't do this. I've been here 12 years. The length of employment, Legal replied, has no bearing on documented violations. His face collapsed. He looked small, not powerful, not intimidating, just small. Security arrived within minutes. He was escorted out. No applause, no spectacle. Just a quiet walk down the hallway he used to strut through like he owned it. And then he was gone. 3 days later, HR called me again. I expected closure paperwork. Instead, the HR rep smiled. Evan, we appreciate your cooperation during the review. We also reviewed your performance history, your technical contributions, and the role you played in identifying process gaps. I blinked. Okay. The infrastructure director role is opening next quarter. If you're interested, you'll be fast-tracked for consideration. I sat there stunned. A year ago, I would have doubted myself. But now, I'm interested, I said. She nodded. Good. You've earned it. The following weeks felt unreal. People stopped whispering when I walked by. Colleagues shook my hand. Mark clapped me on the back and said, Told you he'd trip over his own ego eventually. Even Kristen apologized, quietly but sincerely. New policies got implemented. Verbal directives were banned. All assignments required documentation. HR started doing anonymous climate surveys. The entire department changed because one man finally hit a wall he built himself. One evening after a long day of normal work, peaceful, unhurried, finally mine, I stayed in the empty office for a minute. No adrenaline, no tension, no fear of the next email or meeting invite, just quiet, the kind I hadn't felt in months. I sat back in my chair, hands behind my head, and let it wash over me. This wasn't victory. It wasn't revenge. It was relief. The kind that comes only when you stop carrying something that was never yours to carry. Collins thought I'd be passive forever, that I'd keep my head down, that I'd fold under pressure. He thought I was the kind of man who avoided conflict at all costs. He never imagined that the quiet guy he tried to crush would be the one who documented everything. He never imagined the investigation would reach compliance or legal. He never imagined people would speak. He never imagined the paper trail would damn him. He never imagined that the person he underestimated would be the person who ended his career. And the truth is simple. I didn't destroy him. He destroyed himself. I just stopped getting in the way.